October 28, 1943. Shortly after 10 o'clock in the morning, a gray wind rolled across the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, carrying the scent of wet steel and autumn rain. Cranes groaned above half-finished hulls, sparks fell in showers from welding torches, and the metallic scent of oil drifted beneath a sky the color of smoke. Men in coveralls moved between scaffolds and ladders, shouting orders over the constant hum of machinery. That hum was the heartbeat of the wartime Navy, steady, industrial, and familiar. Yet beneath it, on that morning, a quieter vibration pulsed through one corner of the yard, a vibration that did not belong to shipbuilding or routine maintenance. It was a deeper, heavier undercurrent that felt almost alive, as if electricity had begun to gather in the air. At the center of this quiet disturbance stood the destroyer escort USS Eldridge. Her hull was new, her decks unworn, her paint still fresh from the yard. She was a product of American speed and wartime necessity, part of a fleet designed to escort convoys, hunt submarines, and bring soldiers safely across the Atlantic. Yet on this morning she was not being fitted with depth charges or radar equipment. The men working near her hull later recalled feeling a faint tingling on their skin, as if the air around the ship carried an unfamiliar charge. The usual hum of machinery seemed to shift in tone, rising and falling in patterns that no one could identify. To understand how this moment became the foundation of one of the most persistent naval legends of the 20th century, we must step back to the early war years. The United States had entered the conflict after December 7, 1941, and the Navy had launched a massive effort to protect shipping lanes threatened by German U-boats. Engineers were exploring every possible method of shielding ships from magnetic mines and improving radar countermeasures. Experiments with electromagnetic fields were documented in several wartime research programs. The idea of manipulating magnetic signatures was real. The fear of German submarines stalking convoys was real. The hum of electrical current around docked ships became a normal sound. In the years after the war, this hum would become the symbolic object at the heart of the legend. A sound both mundane and mysterious, representing the edge between known science and imagined possibility. The Philadelphia experiment story begins not with sailors or scientists, but with a man who lived far from the war rooms of Washington. His name was Carl Meredith Allen. In the early 1950s, he wrote a series of letters to the United States Office of Naval Research. He wrote under the name Carlos Miguel Allende, a detail that caused confusion but did not erase the consistency of his handwriting. In these letters, he claimed that on October 28, 1943, while aboard a merchant ship named SS Andrew Furuseth, he had witnessed something impossible. He claimed he had seen the USS Eldridge become invisible and then vanish entirely from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, surrounded by a strange glow. He wrote that the ship reappeared moments later, hundreds of miles away in Norfolk, Virginia, before returning to Philadelphia in a burst of what he called vortex-like distortion. His letters offered precise dates and confident language. They referenced electromagnetic theory and hinted at government secrecy. The tone was unusual. The claims were extraordinary. Yet the letters were real, and the Navy received them. Shortly afterward, a new detail entered the story. In 1955, a scientist named Morris K. Jessup published a book discussing unidentified flying objects and speculative propulsion systems. Someone later identified as Carl Allen obtained a copy and filled its margins with extensive annotations. These handwritten notes discussed teleportation, magnetism, and the Philadelphia incident. They were written in multiple voices, though handwriting experts later confirmed that all belonged to the same hand. In 1956, an anonymous package containing the annotated book arrived at the Office of Naval Research. Instead of discarding it, the Navy forwarded the book to a private engineering company, Varro Manufacturing, which produced a limited internal edition. This version, later known as the Varro edition, reproduced Jessup's book with every annotation intact. Here the hum of electrical current returned as symbol. The Navy did not endorse Allen's claims, but by choosing to duplicate the book, they unintentionally added a layer of quiet tension. The decision created a charged space between official silence and public curiosity. Into that space, the legend would grow. During the 1950s and 1960s, the Eldridge's wartime logs were examined. They showed routine escort duty in the Mediterranean, not teleportation experiments. Historians found no evidence that the ship had been in Philadelphia on the date Allen described. The hum of electrical current that filled dry docks during degassing tests was grounded in science, not supernatural effect. Yet the legend did not fade. Instead, it expanded. Part of the emotional contrast lies here. American sailors during the war experienced normal dangers: torpedoes, storms, mines, submarine duels. They expected mechanical failures, electrical hazards, and the unpredictable behavior of wartime machinery. They did not expect stories about ships vanishing into fields of shimmering light, yet the legend suggested that deep within the classified research programs of the war, something extraordinary had been attempted. Something that blurred the line between practical science and the unknown. Something hidden beneath the hum of electrical current. By the early 1960s, researchers investigated the contradictions in Allen's letters. His accounts shifted with each retelling. Sometimes he described teleportation, sometimes invisibility, sometimes catastrophic physical harm to the crew. Yet one detail remained constant. He insisted that something unusual had happened involving the USS Eldridge. That insistence carried emotional weight, even when documentation did not support it. Newspapers published articles about the alleged experiment. Mystery magazines added dramatic embellishments. Radio programs retold the story to captivated audiences. The image of a warship dissolving into light carried a mythic power that no official denial could erase. To the public, the hum of electrical current had become more than sound. It had become a door to possibility. In 1980, a book titled The Philadelphia Experiment Project Invisibility reignited interest. It blended documented history with speculation and hearsay. It introduced stories of crewmen allegedly fused into bulkheads, a dramatic detail never supported by any record but repeated widely thereafter. The book spread faster than official reports could counter. People wanted to believe that wartime science had pushed boundaries too far, that the government had buried the consequences, that the hum of electrical current had risen into something more dangerous. In response, the Navy issued statements explaining that no such experiment had occurred. They emphasized that the Eldridge's logs were intact and verifiable. They noted that the ship had never been in Philadelphia on the dates Allen described. But official language could not outmatch imagination. Every denial created more suspicion. This effect is known historically as the secrecy paradox. When an institution denies too briefly, the public often interprets the silence as confirmation. 17. To understand why the Philadelphia experiment survived for decades, we must examine what was real during that period. Degaussing technology, used to reduce magnetic signatures, involved powerful electrical currents passing through cables installed along ship hulls. Testing these systems produced visible sparks, strong vibrations, and shifts in electrical fields. Sailors often reported tingling sensations on their skin when standing too close to active coils. The hum of electrical current could fill the air around a ship during testing, creating a sensory experience that felt unnatural, especially to men unfamiliar with the technology. Radar research also accelerated during the war. Scientists worked on systems that bent radio waves, scattered signals, and absorbed electromagnetic reflections. These innovations were designed to confuse detection equipment, not to make ships disappear physically. Yet to the untrained eye, unusual electrical effects or sharply fluctuating magnetic readings could appear alarming. It is possible that routine wartime experiments created impressions that later contributed to the myth. Another element of the emotional contrast lies in the identities of the men involved. Sailors and shipyard workers lived inside metal worlds driven by engines, generators, and high-voltage equipment. Many witnessed electrical arcs jumping across wet surfaces or felt heavy vibrations when power systems surged. The hum of electrical current was a daily companion, sometimes comforting, sometimes unsettling. In conditions like this, misunderstandings could grow into stories, and stories could become legends. By the 1990s, the Philadelphia experiment became a fixture of internet discussion boards. Without the need for verification, narratives multiplied. Some versions tied the event to early nuclear research. Others linked it to Einstein's unified field theories. A few connected it to unrelated topics, such as time travel. None of these additions had historical grounding. Yet they flourished because the legend had reached a critical mass. The hum of electrical current had become metaphor, symbol, and canvas. To bring the subject back to fact, we must examine the physical record. The Eldridge was launched in July 1943, commissioned in August 1943, and served in the Mediterranean from 1944 through 1945. Logs show her movements consistently. Her participation in convoy operations is well documented. After the war, she was transferred to the Hellenic Navy under the name Leon. Photographs of her Greek service show no structural anomalies, no missing compartments, and no legacy of clandestine modifications. Her machinery, hull, and wiring were ordinary for her class. Her history was not marked by vanished crew or strange repairs. She was a normal escort ship with a normal service life. So why does the legend persist? Because it rests not on one man's letters, but on the tension between secrecy and curiosity. During wartime, the Navy absolutely conducted classified research. It tested electronics, magnetism, camouflage, radar countermeasures, and more. Most of these programs remained hidden for decades. When pieces of truth finally emerged, they confirmed that governments often conceal technology beyond public knowledge. Into that environment, the Philadelphia experiment fit perfectly. It represented the fear that science had crossed into danger. It represented the suspicion that institutions hide mistakes. And it represented the quiet thrill of imagining a ship slipping through reality. The symbolic hum of electrical current is the thread that binds the myth. It is familiar, yet faintly ominous. It is the sound of innovation, but also the sound of uncertainty. In factories, in shipyards, in laboratories, that hum marked progress. It also marked the boundary between what could be controlled and what could not. The Philadelphia experiment grew from that boundary. In the end, the story is less about whether the Eldridge vanished and more about why people believed it could. It reflects a cultural moment shaped by secrecy, rapid scientific advancement, and the lingering unease of a world transformed by war. It reveals how easily isolated reports, conflicting memories, and official silence can produce something larger than fact. It shows how the human mind fills the spaces left empty by incomplete information. The epilogue of this story lies in the quiet truth that history often hides in plain sight. The Eldridge never slipped through space. Her crew never dissolved into metal. She served her country in routine but essential work. Yet the legend that grew around her reminds us of a deeper reality. Even in an age of science, people remain captivated by the edge between known and unknown. The hum of electrical current still whispers in laboratories and workshops, promising possibility. That whisper is powerful. It carries imagination forward. It invites questions. And so the Philadelphia experiment endures as a cautionary tale. It warns us that myths are born not from evidence, but from the spaces where evidence ends. It reminds us that secrecy, even when harmless, invites speculation. And it shows that the most persistent stories are not those rooted in fact, but those rooted in the quiet pulse of human curiosity, echoing like a faint hum across the long corridors of history. The legend survives because it mirrors something deeply human. People have always searched for meaning in what they cannot see, and the 20th century was an era shaped by forces that seemed almost beyond human scale. Electricity, Magnetism, radar, nuclear energy, and classified research programs all reshaped the borders of what felt possible. Ordinary citizens knew these technologies existed, but rarely knew how they worked. In that atmosphere, the unknown did not feel distant. It felt close, humming beneath the skin of everyday life. The Philadelphia experiment slipped into that environment and found a home, not because it offered proof, but because it offered an explanation for the unease of a generation standing between old certainties and new sciences. The myth also reflects the lingering fear that modern institutions can hide almost anything behind closed doors. The Second World War proved that governments could keep enormous operations secret for years. Entire code-breaking networks, experimental aircraft, and weapons projects remained invisible to the public until long after the war ended. When truth emerges slowly, even in unrelated contexts, it creates fertile ground for legends. The Philadelphia story grew in that soil, gaining weight not through documents, but through the shadow left by real secrecy elsewhere. Most of all, the myth survives because it speaks to the imagination. It transforms a simple escort ship into a symbol of the boundary between the known and the unknown. It suggests that behind the ordinary surface of history, there might be hidden experiments, forgotten attempts to push beyond the limits of physics, and moments when human ambition reached further than wisdom allowed. Even when documentation proves otherwise, the story continues to whisper to those who feel that the world still contains mysteries not yet touched by science. In this way, the Philadelphia experiment becomes less a question about a single ship and more a reflection of humanity's enduring hunger for wonder. It reminds us that as long as there are unanswered questions, there will be legends waiting to fill the silence between them, carried forward like a soft electrical hum that refuses to fade.